Accidents are unexpected. Would you know what to do at the accident scene? Be prepared before an accident. Avra and Smith presents the My Lawyer app for your smartphone. Download it for free at avra.com and be prepared when you need it most.
All right, welcome to another edition of the Pat Dooley Show. Appreciate everybody for clicking on. We have a nice panel coming up a little bit later. We'll be discussing 5 items with them as well as the list. Obviously, it wasn't a great day for the Florida Gators in Jacksonville at Everbank Field. Great weekend, played in Danny Werfel's golf tournament. Just so if you didn't read my story, Danny's doing better, but he's still not all the way back from the Guillain-Barré syndrome. He's having to do a lot of sleeping, but he had a wonderful tournament there for Desire Street. That was a great time. Unfortunately, the game wasn't so good. The first half was good, obviously. Look, the bottom line is that Chris Rainey fumble changed the whole game. But there was also, in that first half, so many opportunities to blow the thing wide open. I think Florida had the ball in Georgia territory in that game like 9 times and only scored 13 points, all of them on 4th down. This offense has got a lot of problems going right now. We'll see if they can recover and get it going. We all knew October was going to be rough, but I don't think anybody thought 0-4. The possibility was always there, but I think you figured they would find a way to win. I'm still a believer in Will Muschamp and this staff. I still think they're going to get it done. It's just going to take a while. They're having to redo everything. And they're having to rebuild this team. And it's not that Urban didn't leave them players. He left them players that were for him, for his kind of philosophies. And now they're having to adjust. I think Gator fans need to be a little patient. I know it's not your greatest attribute. At any rate, Florida moves on to play Vanderbilt. And obviously, I've had people tell me, I can't believe I'm worried about Vanderbilt. Well, Vanderbilt's a lot better. That's part of the reason. And don't forget, in 05, they came in here almost beat Florida. Might have beaten Florida if not for a bogus call on Earl Bennett. But they really had a big decline last year. And this year, they're back at it with a pretty good team. They have a chance to get bowl eligible. A win over Florida would go a long way because they still have Kentucky left. In fact, I would say that would probably do it, because they're going to beat Kentucky. The one good thing for Florida is that Vanderbilt on the road has only scored 3 points in 2 games. Now that was at Alabama and at South Carolina. So and they've changed quarterbacks since then, and obviously Aaron Rodgers' brother is doing great things for them. They've scored a lot of points in the last 3 games, including against Georgia, and last week should have at least had gone to overtime with Arkansas. So it's going to be a battle for the Gators. They're going to have to play well. They can't just roll it out there and try to win this game. It's amazing that they are kind of 2 touchdown favorites. And, I don't know who these guys have been watching, but the funny thing is they came out as an 11-point spread and it's jumped up to 13. So people are betting Florida. We'll see. And we'll see also what it's going to be like in the Swamp. It's homecoming, so hopefully people be excited about just being back in Gainesville. Still a great town, even if the football team's not doing too well. Of course, we have the big game this weekend, LSU-Auburn. Looking forward to that. You couldn't ask for, I've complained sometimes that the schedule hasn't been great to us. You couldn't ask for a better situation where 12-15 game, get your stuff done, get home, light a fire out there in the back porch, have a cold beverage, and watch Game of the Century. Again, we'll have another one probably in 2 years. But I'm looking forward to that game. And the other game, of course, South Carolina-Arkansas, which is amazing that you have 2 teams in the top 10 playing each other, and everybody's like going, yeah, whatever, Alabama, LSU. I had this question somebody asked me. Let's say South Carolina wins Saturday, and they're playing Florida. Would you root for South Carolina to beat Florida because you don't want Georgia to win the East? Mull that one around in your head. I'm not sure where some Gator fans would come down to that. I was asked that question by 4 or 5 different fans via email. So, I don't know. I think you always root for your team, but at any rate, all right, we will come back with 3 things right after this.
Accidents are unexpected. Would you know what to do at the accident scene? Be prepared before an accident. Avra and Smith presents the My Lawyer app for your smartphone. Download it for free at avra.com and be prepared when you need it most.
All right, we do this every week on the Pat Dooley Show. It's 3 things that I thought about the weekend. Number 1, typically Tommy Tuberville. I talked about this with Robbie. He's going to pull one off like he did against Oklahoma. He's won something like 13 games against top 10 teams, but he can't get his teams up for the little ones. Iowa State just shellacked them 41-7. That's unbelievable, and yet It's not surprising. Houston not used to be that way when he would win big games, but he doesn't win those games anymore. But Tuberville's got a knack for doing that, for winning a huge game and stunning the world. When he's, we know he's beaten Florida several times, and then coming back and losing a game he shouldn't lose. Number 2, empty seats. Are we going to see a lot of empty seats Saturday? I've had a lot of people who are predicting in the thousands, and it could be. I think the fact that it's homecoming helps a little. What you really might see is the Furman game could really be embarrassing. But I always tell Gator fans, either you're Gator fans or not, the team. It's easy to support a team when you're winning. It's harder when you're losing. But we've seen the empty seats before, certainly during the Ron Zook era. So we'll see what kind of crowd shows up. I don't think it's going to be pretty on Saturday. And finally, I like Will Muschamp a lot. I think he's going to end up doing a good job. But one thing he's got to learn, stop yelling at the officials, because it's not working. It's working in reverse. I've seen coaches, I've seen it happen, where you get on the officials so hard that they subconsciously or consciously, they call a lot of penalties on you. I'm not saying Florida's not committing a lot of these penalties, but all I know is I saw almost consecutive plays, they certainly weren't consecutive, where a Georgia defender and a Florida defender did the exact same thing, and the Florida defender was called for it and the Georgia defender wasn't. I'm talking about pass interference. Just, he's got to quit being a D coordinator in this sense. Just, you obviously want to have discussions with the officials, but you don't want to get on them so hard that they resent you. And I think that may be happening for him. I'm not saying Florida would have won the game if they got the calls. All I'm saying is, if I'm Will, maybe it's time for him to kind of stop yelling. And I know a lot of Gator fans aren't happy with it. Of course, Gator fans are not happy with anything that happens when you've lost 4 in a row. I think if he was yelling and they were winning and they weren't getting penalties, nobody would care. But that's the way it works out. All right, we're going to go to our panel. Great panel today. Mark Long, good friend of mine who's the writer for the Associated Press, covers the Gators in all sports and, of course, the Jaguars as well. And Doug Johnson, the former Gator quarterback. They'll join us right after this.
Accidents are unexpected. Would you know what to do at the accident scene? Be prepared before an accident. Avra and Smith presents the My Lawyer app for your smartphone. Download it for free at avra.com. And be prepared when you need it most.
Okay, welcome back to the Pat Dooley Show. We got a great panel again for you on this day. And Mark Long, who covers college football and all things for the Associated Press in Florida. What don't you cover? Volleyball?
There you go. Volleyball.
Soccer?
Women's, I've covered water polo.
There you go.
The
all right.
Olympics.
And of course, Doug Johnson, the former Florida quarterback, who joins us as well. Let's start off with the first topic, guys. What are the chances, Doug, that Alabama LSU lives up to the hype we're going to see all week?
I think there's a big chance. I think when you have two teams like that undoubtedly have the unbelievable physical ability on both sides of the ball, you can't hide that. So it's not about can the offense click or can the defense click. It's just raw talent, raw strength, raw physical ability that there's no way to shadow that.
Is there a chance, though, that these coaches outthink themselves? Sometimes you see that where they go, we got to come up with all these different plays.
I definitely think Alabama's a lot better coached team, but I think Les Miles, who knows, he might kick an onside kick, opening kickoff, and kick another one, at the start of it. So who knows what happens with that game with Les Miles being a coach. But if it gets down to nuts and bolts, I think Alabama's a better coach team. And when you play at home with that they have a running back that's probably as impressive as I've ever seen.
Right.
I think the edge has to go to Alabama.
Mark, last year I became a Les Miles fan because I'm a big believer that on short yardage, if you run a reverse, it's going to work.
Right.
He won it all the time, but if you run it once, it's going to work. He ran it. That was the key play there. What do you think the chances are of them living up to the hype of this game?
Well, I agree with Doug that it's absolutely two great teams, two of the best teams in the country. But remember, they've dubbed this game as the game of the century. Now, I know it's a fairly new century and there haven't been a ton of great games, but we had 1 versus 2 not too long ago.
06, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like, this is the first time we had 1 versus 2 in the regular season ever. So, is it overhyped? Probably, but no doubt, best 2 teams in the country, and you hope that it lives up to the hype. And can it? Sure. 2 defensive battle.
Right.
I actually disagree with Doug in terms of I actually like LSU in this game. I think Alabama's been able to hide McCarron for most of the season, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to do it against this defense.
Well, that's possible, but LSU's kind of had the same. They go with the 2 quarterbacks and Lee and Jefferson, but they haven't asked them to do a lot either.
Right.
So I don't think that I think in the end, home field is what I'm leaning toward right now. I don't have to make the pick yet. I'm not going to make it yet, but I'm leaning towards home field because we've been there. I've been to Alabama, I guess, 4 times, and man, it is a loud place.
It is.
It's pretty amazing. All right, number 2 for our panel. I actually wrote this down as is 11 too much of a spread for Florida Vanderbilt. It's up to 13 now, Mark. Florida's a 13-point favorite after losing 4 in a row. What do you think?
It's still Vandy. So, granted, they've played a little bit better, but they played well at home. If you look at their 2 road games in the SEC, I think they've been outscored 55-3.
Right.
And again, that's at Alabama and that's
South
South Carolina. So, 2 teams that are considerably better than Florida. So, so you understand where the spread's coming from. But I mean, if I had to bet on it, I'm taking Vanderbilt the whole way. I'm not sure Florida scores 11, and or 13 now. So, but it is still Vandy, and something tells me they'll find a way to lose that game. And if you look at them on the road, they've been a different team on the road. So.
But they've also been a different team with Jordan Rodgers at quarterback, and he's kind of ignited them. They should have beaten Arkansas. I mean, the fumble return for a touchdown, missing the chip shot field goal. They had a chance to beat Georgia. Both those games, were at home, but still, they're a different Vandy team than what we're used to.
But I still believe that when you have that many turnovers or not getting turnovers, and you have that many penalties, and you let a team kind of linger in the game, and then your signal caller is still probably playing at 50 to 60%. I mean, it's going to be a close game in my opinion. And I tell you, if Brantley doesn't play in that game, I think it's a pick 'em. I mean, I really believe that Florida would struggle against anyone with the next 2 guys after Brantley.
They're just not ready.
They're just not ready. I mean, you can see it in their eyes. I mean, you can look at Driscoll when he goes in the game, and he is, I'm not going to say scared to death, but he's got no clue. And there's a reason why that they haven't pushed him out there right now, because I think they could actually hurt him in his career as far as confidence-wise.
I've gotten a lot of emails this week. Well, a lot of emails. Some of them have said to me, let's forget this season's over. Let's go with one of the young guys, which we know Will's not going to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just not going to. He's going to try to win every game because that's the way he is. And I don't know that it's ever a good idea.
No.
Just to.
I mean, what Brantley's gone through. I mean, let's
Yeah,
face it.
exactly.
Look at the quarterbacks who've gone through there. He has gotten the worst situation handed to him as far as things he really couldn't even control. I mean, you're talking about no talent around him. You're talking about regime changes. You're talking about a system that didn't fit him. And now you're talking about him, which I think, if you go back to the Alabama game, I really truly believe that game would have been a lot closer because he was managing the game. They were converting third downs. He was making great decisions. He wasn't flustered. His movement in the pocket was as good as I've ever seen. That game would have been a lot different because when they're moving the chains and they're also keeping that offense off the field.
Right.
Florida's defense kept getting the ball back. And if Brantley plays in that game and plays the entire game, I truly believe people would have been surprised at the outcome. I'm not saying that Florida would have won, but it would have been a tight ball game. And just the fact of what he's gone through as a player, that university owes it to him to let him play it out.
And you gloss
I don't
over,
disagree with that.
Yeah, and you gloss over the part that is the biggest part is he replaced a legend. And of all people,
Right.
to have on the panel of replacing legends, it's not an easy thing to do, to go in there and replace a guy, because you're never, it's just, you can, don't get me wrong, but it's tough to live up to, you're stepping in that guy's shadow.
Yeah, I mean, Doug and I have talked about it many times. I remember writing a column about it. At some point, you feel like you're fighting against 2 different opponents, and
I
it's
just
tough.
think Brantley was never even given an opportunity really here, a chance to show what he can do. And then he gets hurt, and it's just like, man, this kid just can't get a break. But I hope he gets better. I hope he continues to get better throughout the season. I think November could really be a chance for this team to rebound and to kind of put their mark where they could just win out in November. How awesome would that be, to win out for homecoming, for all the fans coming back to relive their college moments, to be able to beat the old ball coach and to be able to beat Florida State, which is always big. I mean, there's still something to play for right now, and something to play for these seniors leaving.
Yeah, and I've said this many times. I'm a fan of John Brantley for this reason. In college football today, if a kid's not starting, he's leaving. And here's a guy who stuck it out, and I think he deserves a better ending than what he's got so far. We'll see how it all works out. Our third topic, Doug, you talked about this, but can you explain how Florida's last in the SEC in penalties and turnover margin?
Well, I think when things kind of get bad on a team and things are kind of going downhill, players tend to lose, the discipline. and we're really, if you look at a lot of penalties, it's just all about discipline. It's all about why are you being selfish, taking a cheap shot, or why are you
wrong, pal.
Why are we not moving your feet, getting your body in the correct position, but you're going to take the easy way out and hold, or a lot of it is we're kind of overmatched in that sense. I think if you look at the offensive line, this line we were talking about, this line is not built for coming in there, rolling your hips, moving people out of the way, get to the second level. This line is basically, you're built for the spread offense, which all you're doing is trying to beat a guy to a spot.
Right.
Let the backers over pursue and then look for cutback lanes. That's all the spread offense is. It's how wide can we widen the field to widen the gaps, because we kind of have a equation right now. It's just a devastating equation when you have linemen who can't move people and backs who can't break arm tackles. You have no shot.
Right. So, you're not going to be able to run the ball. Yeah.
So it's it's a tough thing. We look at the delay games. We don't know what the deal is with that. I know Charlie was up in the box. I love when the OC's in the box. I think that's where the OC should be. How's the play getting into the quarterback? Was it Brantley because he couldn't really move around that much and get in and out of the huddle? Was it the personnel guy who was responsible for getting the personnel in and out? We never know. We don't know. But ultimately that is the quarterback's deal. That is his responsibility. But I think a lot of it wasn't all on Johnny. It was it was kind of a collective errors on that whole front.
Which is kind of like this season has been an imperfect storm. But Mark, you would think that somebody along the line that they played in October would fumble a snap, or just kick one. But it's not just that they haven't gotten any turnover. They got one turnover in all of October. There were no fumbles by the opponents. You rarely see that. Yeah,
and Doug hit it right on the nail right off that. It comes down to talent. They're just overmatched on both sides of the ball, both sides of the line of scrimmage, and that's their number one problem right now. You can say what you want about not having receivers, and you say what you want about not having a big, huge back to get tough yards in the SEC, but it really comes down to it's a line of scrimmage league, and when you can't, stand up and just move people on the line of scrimmage on both sides, you're going to be in trouble. You're not going to get those turnovers, and you're not going to be able to avoid them on the other side.
Yeah, and the other thing, for this team is, everybody talks about the wide receivers, and they haven't really done a whole lot, but it's hard to throw deep crossing patterns when you can't hold blocks for more than like 3 seconds.
It is.
And you saw that in that game where Johnny would drop back, and if it wasn't right there, boom, he was going down.
Well, I tell you, as a quarterback, I don't think he feels comfortable with letting one go down the field, because when as a quarterback you have an understanding with these receivers as when the ball's up there, it's either ours or no one. And I don't care what you have to do. You face mask, pull them down. I don't care what it has to be, but that ball is not going to be turned over. So I don't think there's those receivers or guys that Johnny really feels comfortable where he can just let it go and try to let them run under or maybe make a play, because our receivers, along with our DBs, have terrible ball skills.
Oh, I totally agree with you on that.
Bad ball skills. They're fast, they're athletic looking, but as far as guys who are football players who have ball skills, we do not have it on both sides of the ball right now.
You look at Auburn, where the guy outfights Florida player for the ball. You look at the Honey Badger gets that pick where he outfights DeBose. You look at both Georgia jump balls, and that's exactly been a problem. All right, number 4 on our topic. Would you watch, Mark, a Stanford-Boise State title game? I don't mean that would you watch. Of course you'd watch it. But does it excite you?
It does, only because Andrew Luck is – I've watched him a couple times this year, maybe 3 or 4, and he is every bit as good as he's touted. So from that standpoint, absolutely. I think those kind of players, you want to see what they do in big games. And then on the flip side, Boise, I've been begging for Boise to get a shot so that either they can shut us up, all of us people who don't think they belong in the national title game, or we can shut them up by having them get blindsided and lopsided loss, and then we're going to be done with Boise for the next 10 years or whatever. So I would absolutely watch for those 2 reasons.
The funny thing is, Doug, that I'm predicating this on the winner of Alabama-LSU losing, which LSU could to Arkansas, Alabama could to Auburn, and then of course Oklahoma knocking off Oklahoma State. Then you could get this, but I don't know how much that game would intrigue you. You're a quarterback, so you probably like it because you get Kellen Moore and Andrew Luck.
Yeah, I don't know. I tell you, I wouldn't be very excited about it. The only reason I'd be excited about it is to watch Stanford beat the brakes off of Boise State. And then we could get on with this, because I think it's kind of unfortunate. I'm a big playoff guy. I think we're a playoff in college football. I think it's unfortunate that the loser of this game coming up probably will not have a chance to
Yeah, doubtful they're going to get back in. Yeah.
Which, you know, back in '96, here we go, we lose to Florida State and we get a shot. We were definitely the better team, but we got a second chance. Thank God we got a second chance to really show everybody that that whole first game was a fluke and we were the best team in the country. Where, you know, this Alabama LSU game, who knows, the loser could actually be the better team at the end of the year, but, you know, they're going to be handcuffed because of somebody's got to lose the game.
The funny thing is, the last time we had a game of the century, the loser of that game didn't get to go back and get a second shot because Michigan, there was a lot of lobbying for them, and Kirk Herbstreit was lobbying for them, but Urban Meyer was lobbying over here for Florida to go. All right, the last question for the panel, and Doug, you know the ball coach as well as anybody. They've got Arkansas. They're crippled. They don't have a running back or they're great running back. Of course, they're on their second quarterback, who I'm not real impressed with. Can they go into Fayetteville and win that game against Arkansas?
I think they can, just for the fact that they have a defense. And when you have a defense, you always have a chance. If you ask any coach would tell you, if I had to pick one side of the ball to be good, I want my defense to be good. Because, you know, offensively, if you're good, take out the physicality of it as far as like an Alabama has, you know, that great running back and the big lineman. But offensively, normal offenses, things kind of have to click. Balls kind of got to bounce your way. You know, the defenses kind of got to line up the way you think they are. Players have got to make plays. When you have a physical, big defense, you cannot hide that. You know, it's kind of like wrestling with your younger brother.
Yeah.
You are always going to beat your younger brother in wrestling. I mean, that's a fact of it.
Unless your younger brother's Tebow.
Exactly. But, you know, offensively, things have kind of got to work in rhythm and mechanically have to kind of play out, where a great offense can also have a bad day. A great defense, it's a lot tougher for them to have a bad day.
You know, Mark, I saw a quote from Steve, and I used it in my column the other day, where he said, I don't smile as much coming off the field. I mean, he didn't like winning like this, but he likes winning.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, can they go into Fayetteville? I mean, I don't know what to make of Arkansas, to be honest with you.
I don't either.
Yeah, and Doug's right, absolutely right. South Carolina's defense gives them a chance in every single game, and I don't care who the opponent is. And on the road, at home, that's the thing you build your team around, defense, because you can go into bad conditions, you can get wind, rain, sleet, snow, whatever it is. If you can play good defense, you always have a chance. So they absolutely have a chance going into Arkansas. Now, could they use a few turnovers? You know, a couple things going their way? Absolutely. On the road in the SEC, Arkansas's high-powered offense, yeah, they probably need a couple things to go their way. But I would not count South Carolina out at all in this game.
Arkansas is just so weird in that they don't get started. You know, it takes them a while to get started. I mean, certainly the Vanderbilt game was a great example. Texas A&M, the game, who'd they play that they were 17 and Ole Miss.
Ole Miss,
It was just awful, you know. So Arkansas is a weird team. I really thought they were just a notch below Alabama and LSU, but in the last few weeks, that gap. I really believe this, and I don't know how you guys feel about this. I think there's Alabama, LSU, and then there's Kentucky and Ole Miss, and the other 8 probably just about all the same.
Yeah,
and it's just a matter of where you're playing.
Yeah, they're much closer to Auburn than they are to Alabama, Arkansas.
I mean, I guess it's easy to say Tennessee. I think Tennessee's better than their record. They've had a tough go of it with injuries and stuff. But with Tyler Bray, I think they're right in that middle 8. But that's the way the SEC is. All right, that's going to do it for our panel. I want to thank Mark Long from the Associated Press, former Florida quarterback Doug Johnson. We'll be right back with the list.
Accidents are unexpected. Would you know what to do at the accident scene? Be prepared before an accident. Avra and Smith presents the My Lawyer app for your smartphone. Download it for free at avra.com. And be prepared when you need it most.
Okay, it's time for the list for this week. And the list today, the 5 reasons why Florida's offense ranks 94th in the country. And it's certainly not something that anybody's used to around here. Number 1 is John Brantley's ankle. You know, Doug was saying earlier, I mean, I think he was really coming into his own. That ankle injury just changed this whole season. I don't know if Florida would have beaten Alabama. I doubt it. I don't think Florida would have beaten LSU, but they had a better chance. I think they would have beaten Auburn. And if Brantley was healthy, I think they would have beaten Georgia. But the bottom line is that ankle injury really changed the season and the offense for the Gators. And I've said this before. If I have one criticism of the coaching staff, it would be that they put all their eggs in the John Brantley basket and they didn't get Driscoll and Brissett ready enough in case something happened. I know that Will talked about it and he tried, but they didn't really get him ready. Number 2, play calling. And Charlie Weiss knows a lot more about football than I ever will. But I've been saying this for 4 weeks. Is there not a reverse in the game plan? I mean, run something, a reverse or something, where you can get the momentum of the other team, the defense, going the other way. And too often I've seen Charlie call the same play back-to-back times. You know, it's easy for me to sit here and criticize play calling, but when you're 94th, I might have a little something right. I don't know, just a little tiny bit. Number 3 is Florida's receivers can't get open. Doug and Mark and I were talking about earlier, they don't fight for the balls. Their ball skills aren't good. And that was a great observation by Doug. But, you know, the other thing is Georgia in the second half of that game realized Florida couldn't run the ball because they didn't have the power back and they didn't have Brantley under center. They couldn't get him under center. And they went to man-to-man defense for the most part. And that's when your guys have to get open. They have to be able to get away from people, whether it's physicality, whether it's cuts, whether it's knowing you're out. Florida guys just can't get open. That's part of the reason why the receivers don't get the ball. Number 4 is obviously the offensive line is a real issue for Florida. This is something I'm writing about for Saturday's paper. And Doug has as well talked about. Florida was recruiting an offensive line for the spread. They weren't recruiting a power drop back type of offensive line, and it's really showed up in October. There's no question about it. And number 5 is Florida's recruiting class has not really impacted Florida's offense. Jawan Story, apparently they're going to redshirt. Certainly, we haven't seen one of the receivers is transferred. Jeff Driscoll's the only really freshman who's on offense that's really played and really hasn't had any impact either. So, you know, it'd be great if you had a Sammy Watkins or somebody like that. Now, Sammy Watkins is a guy Florida couldn't get, and either could FSU and either could Miami. He wanted to leave the state of Florida. There were guys who were like that. But if you had a guy who'd come in and energize the team one way or the other, that would help. Maybe that'll happen next year. But certainly, there's not been any new blood that has changed things up for the Gators this year. So those are the reasons why the offense is really struggling right now. We'll see if it gets better against Vanderbilt. Certainly, big game for Florida just to go get bowl eligible. We know that. I want to thank my panel, Doug Johnson and Mark Long. Great stuff from them. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about the Florida game against Vanderbilt as well as its upcoming opponent, the South Carolina Gamecocks. Until then, Pat Dooley, sports columnist of the Gainesville Sun, saying so long from the Sunshine State.
Accidents are unexpected. Would you know what to do at the accident scene? Be prepared before an accident. Avra and Smith presents the My Lawyer app for your smartphone. Download it for free at avra.com and be prepared when you need it most.